Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Please take your seats. And please silence your cell phones before we do anything else. Thank you. We're okay if you tweet, but keep it on silent. Okay. Welcome to another Roc4Israel event. We have a great event tonight and a very esteemed speaker. Before we do that, we want to just remind you of things you might have seen in our email to try to find some bone marrow matches. We have some flyers out there. We started some bone marrow match last week to find a match for Rabbi Klimnik, and already there are 3 potential perfect matches, so we're very thankful, and thank you. And it's just a wonderful thing for the community to rally around. We're going to have one at the Hillel School on Tuesday from 4 to 8, then at the JCC on the 21st, I believe it is, from 4 to 6, I think. But there are flyers out at the table there. So if you know anyone between the ages of 18 to 44 that wants to just get their name on the registry and be a potential bone marrow donor match, it's really easy to fill out a form, and then all they do is take some cheek swabs. There's no needles, no blood, no nothing, and it's really easy, and then they can ship it off and get you added to the registry. So thanks for doing that and being for coming. We had 80 people last week, so it was wonderful. Okay. So we just want to introduce our speaker, Miriam Elman. She is an associate professor of political science at the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. She's currently a research director at PARC, a center devoted to the study of conflict and conflict resolution. She received her PhD in political science from Columbia University and has been a faculty member at the Maxwell School since 2008. She's the editor and co-editor of 5 books and has authored and co-authored over 50 journal articles, book chapters, and government reports on topics related to international and national security in the Middle East. Her most recent books, both published in 2014 by Syracuse University Press, are Democracy and Conflict Resolution, The Dilemmas of Israel's Peacemaking, and Jerusalem, Conflict and Cooperation in a Contested City. For those still coming in, there's some seats on the far side on the left over here, if you're still coming in. A lot of seats over there. You can go here too. That's okay. Miriam is an avid blogger and op-ed writer and now regularly writes on topics related to Israel and the Middle East for the website Legal Insurrection, which is based at Cornell University. Miriam Elman is an award-winning teacher and scholar. Her work has been funded by Harvard University, the U.S. Department of Education, and the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, among other foundations and institutions. She is a frequent consultant for the congressionally funded National Science Foundation, the Institute for International Education, which funds Fulbright scholarships, and the Social Science Research Council. In Israel, she has been an invited speaker at the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya, and Hebrew University's Leonard Davis Institute. She currently serves on the advisory boards of 2 Israeli non-governmental organizations. Elman is a dual American and Israeli citizen. She lived in Israel for 12 years, where she worked on a kibbutz in the Negev, served as a sergeant in the IDF in the Air Force, taught English as a second language in Jerusalem high schools, helped to establish Peace Now in the 1980s by co-founding its very active and politically influential English-speaking student union at Hebrew University, and earned her BA degree from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Miriam Elman has 3 children. She currently serves on the board of the Jewish Federation of Central New York, which is in Syracuse, and has served in the past on the board of the Syracuse Hebrew Day School. Please welcome Miriam Elman.
So, thank you, and good evening. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I first really want to thank Patty Munter, Patty, wherever you are, and Tim, of course, Tim Altier, and the Roc4Israel board for all their efforts in organizing tonight's event. They spent a lot of hours, and I'm really grateful to everything they've done. It's a pleasure to have met with Roc4Israel today. We had just been involved in email exchanges for a few months, but I got to know more about the organization and who's involved in it, and all that Roc4Israel is doing in the Rochester community. I love coming out to Rochester. It's a great city that you have, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. So I'm going to speak for about an hour. We'll break after that into pairs for discussion, which will give us a chance to talk about the issues together, and I'll walk the room a little bit. And after that, I'll come back up here, and there'll be about 20 minutes for Q&A. You should have received some handouts coming in, so please keep those. We'll use those for the discussion. And there's also a packet of photos nearby your chair, which we'll use when we break up into pairs after my talk. This really isn't the kind of talk where you come, you listen, you go home, right? This is the kind of topic where we really need further dialogue, and it requires a lot of hard work. Creating a balanced and fair and evidence-based discourse on Israel doesn't come from osmosis, either on campus or off campus. It requires hard work. It requires dedicated individuals willing to work together to make it happen. So Tim is going to advance the slideshow. So next slide. So I want to start with our central question for the evening. How can we distinguish between legitimate criticism of Israeli politics and policies and criticism that crosses the line into anti-Semitic hate speech? Anti-Semitism has been around for 2,000 years, and its resurgence can't easily be described in rational terms. So the first thing I want to talk about is how bad is it today? Next slide. So we know that over 1 billion people on the planet harbor deeply anti-Semitic views. That's about 26% of the world's adults. In the Middle East, hatred of the Jew is entrenched. The highest levels that the Anti-Defamation League found was in the Palestinian territories, where 93% of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza hold deeply anti-Semitic views. That figure also tracks with results from Pew surveys and polls done by Palestinian institutes. The figures are also high in Iraq, 92%, in Yemen, Algeria, Libya, Tunisia. Majorities also hold anti-Semitic views. Next slide. And in Europe, like the 1930s, we do have some openly anti-Semitic political parties with parliamentary representation, and some have street militias, and we haven't seen that since the 1920s and 1930s. Record numbers of French Jews have been emigrating to Israel in recent years. They're buying up apartments in Israel just in case. Last February, over 4,000 Jews rushed to an Israeli apartment sale with a fair held in Paris. So anti-Semitism is very serious in Europe, and it's getting worse. Next slide. Attacks against British Jews have reached new heights, with anti-Jewish hate crimes doubling to nearly 1,200 instances in 2014. That's the highest annual total ever recorded in the UK. Incidents have ranged from graffiti to damage against synagogues. In Edinburgh last year, a 12-year-old Jewish girl was sprayed in the face with deodorant by a fellow classmate who yelled, "Gas the Jews." Next slide. In some places in Europe, like in Malmö, Sweden, just walking while Jewish can get you harassed, heckled, spit upon, even beat up. So what about America? Overall, in the United States, hate crime is on the decline, but anti-Semitic hate crimes are still making up the bulk of the religious-based crimes in America, according to the FBI. Next slide. So nearly 60% of the 1,116 anti-religious hate crimes in 2012 were anti-Jewish. It's a statistic that's holding steady. The FBI just released a new report in 2014. Next slide. 58.2% of religious bias crimes were against Jews and Jewish institutions. Anti-Islamic offenses were at 16.3%, and 6.1% were anti-Catholic, and that's by way of comparison. And which state in the United States leads the nation in terms of anti-Jewish hate crimes? Does anybody know? I hear Michigan. Any other? New York, you are residents of the state that has the highest anti-Jewish hate crime statistic. According to the ADL, New York leads the nation with an increase of 21% anti-Jewish hate crimes last year. We know that on American colleges and university campuses, there's been a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism. Jewish students are increasingly reporting that they're feeling harassed, targeted, discriminated against, even regardless of their views on Israel. Next slide. A study recently released by Trinity College and the Louis Brandeis Center for Human Rights under law last year found that 54% of Jewish college students claim they've experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism on their campus in the past year. According to a number of organizations that are tracking it, the data is pretty striking. At schools where there are active BDS, that's boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaigns, where those campaigns are being promoted, that's where we're seeing Jewish students, next slide, being physically and verbally assaulted, vilified on social media, intimidated into silence, and discriminated against. It's where we're seeing not only hate speech, but hate crimes, Jewish students' property, and the property of Jewish student organizations being defaced and damaged, and students and even faculty events being disrupted and shut down. Next slide. So it's where we're hearing that Jewish students are having their Jewishness probed as a prerequisite for government office, which happened to these lovely young women last year at a University of California campus. What's happening is that students, and even more disturbingly, faculty too, are crossing the line from acceptable criticism and debate about Israel into blatant anti-Semitism. So I think it is important, and it behooves us to understand what the difference is. Ira Foreman, who is the US State Department's special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, recently called Jew hatred a retrovirus, morphing from pagan anti-Semitism to Christian anti-Semitism to Enlightenment anti-Semitism, and now to anti-Semitism associated with anti-Zionism. And that's also the way Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks discusses the issue. Next slide. According to Sacks, today's anti-Semitism is the denial to Jews as a distinctive faith and people the right to govern themselves in the land of their beginnings. As Sacks puts it, justice and human rights become code words for denying Jewish peoplehood. During the Middle Ages, Jews were hated for their religion. In the 19th and 20th centuries, they were hated for their race, and today they are hated for their nation state. For Sacks, what's important to note is that anti-Semitism isn't just about Jews. It's in fact an offense against human rights, against the fundamental dignity of difference. Next slide. But today what we see is that assaults on Jews often get couched in the language of human rights. So Israel is accused of cardinal sins against human rights: apartheid, crimes against humanity, genocide, ethnic cleansing. Basically, it's a systematic falsification. The accusations are tendentious, they're disproportionate, they're often made in bad faith. They become parodies of reality. Israel can hardly be described as a settler colonial state. Most of the Jewish population of Israel is composed of refugees or their descendants from Europe and from neighboring Middle Eastern states. They are hardly colonizers from across the oceans. Jews have always been indigenous to Palestine. The historical, spiritual, genetic, and archaeological evidence links Jews with the country for thousands of years. Nor today does Israel, warts and all, bear any resemblance to South African apartheid. And if you don't believe that, I can direct you to dozens of articles written by people who lived through the apartheid era in South Africa and emphatically reject the comparison. Even the political arrangement in the Palestinian territories today is not akin to apartheid. As a number of international legal analysts have noted, Gaza is not under occupation as that legal term is defined. In the West Bank, 95% of Palestinians are self-governed. Mahmoud Abbas is in the 11th year of what should have been a 4-year term. Yet somehow, even the lack of elections in PA-controlled territory is blamed on Israel. Next slide. I direct you to a blogger, and if you like social media, which I do, I'm an avid fan, I think you'll like looking at this blog, whether you agree with it or not. It's Elder of Zion. And he has initiated a social media campaign to expose the absurdity of the apartheid charge. There's hundreds more of these sorts of photos and images and depictions on his site. Now, I'm trained as a political scientist, a social scientist, and I don't have formal training in the study of anti-Semitism, which is its own field of study. But I've gone up a learning curve over the years, trying to get a better handle of it for myself and for my students. It's involved a lot of reading, talking with experts, going to many, many conferences, and I've come to realize that anti-Semitism is not in the eye of the beholder, nor is it a moving target, nor is it a shifting goalpost, which is the way it's often described. In addition, the charge of anti-Semitism should never be wielded as a blunt weapon to silence political or intellectual criticism. Next slide. Further, even the most intemperate and uncivil critical statements of Israel's government, its policies, and Israeli society are not anti-Semitic. If it were otherwise, most of what is said in the Israeli press and media and by Israeli politicians would rise to the category of anti-Semitism. Israelis are the fiercest critics of just about everything their government does, as you can see in these slides and many others. Of course, civility is very worthwhile, especially, I think, for the campus where it's a laudable norm for conversation. Scholars have every right to speak out on contentious topics. Still, we should be rewarding well-reasoned, evidence-based argument rather than sensational invective. Nor should students expect to be coddled or protected from uncomfortable truths or diverse opinions, even those they may find offensive. Criticism of Israel rises to anti-Semitism not because it's profane or uncivil or intemperate, although it can often be all of those things. Using the F word, which you see a lot if you frequent the websites that I do, using the F word to curse Israel's politics or policies does not make you an anti-Semite. I think it makes you a poor writer. I think it probably doesn't make you the best fit for a university post. Next slide. But criticism of Israel is only anti-Semitism when it makes a mendacious argument, employing falsehoods to delegitimize and demonize Israel and to deny its right to exist. Another way of putting this is that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic when it expresses an utter hostility to Jewish peoplehood and the self-determination of the Jewish people, and when it projects the negative stereotypes of the Jew onto the Jewish majority state. And here are just two examples on the slides, where you have a woman, an activist, saying, "The ugly reality at the heart of the Zionist Jewish state revealed, when the disease is in the roots, the only remedy is to uproot." And an academic, a scholar, saying, "At this point, if Netanyahu appeared on TV with a necklace made from the teeth of Palestinian children, would anybody be surprised?" Hashtag Gaza. And now a politician. Next slide. We can consider the remarks made by British Labour Party MP Gerald Kaufman, a longtime supporter of the anti-Israel boycott movement. He was speaking at an event hosted by the Palestine Return Council, a group that reportedly has links to Hamas. And here is what he said. I'll tell you why, because as a Jew, I can tell you, in a way which perhaps nobody else in this room can, that it's Jewish money, it's Jewish donations, it's support from the Jewish Chronicle. All these things bias our conservative government. And that's not all. He also said that Israel was framing Palestinians as terrorists and planting knives next to their bodies. Now, we all know that for over 100 days, hundreds of Israeli men, women, and children just going about their daily routines and minding their own business have been stoned and shot and knifed and run over in the streets. But apparently, Kaufman knows better. He said more than half the stabbing claims were fabricated. The other half were probably true, but there's no way to tell because the Israelis executed the Palestinians and no one asked questions. That was a cartoon also disseminated by Fatah, which you see here on the screen, a key faction of the Palestinian Authority, and it was making the same point. The Jew as dishonest and deceitful and child killers. They shoot, they add the knife, they take the photo. So anti-Semitism has a precise definition with specific manifestations. Next slide. At its heart, it is the negative stereotype of the Jew. The Jew is sinister. The Jew is clannish, rootless, parasitic, cunning, money-grubbing, power-grabbing. The Jews as disloyal and traitorous citizens in the countries where they live, and as responsible for the terrible things that are done to them. History is littered with attempts to cast Jews as overwhelmingly powerful, centrally important, and responsible for society's problems. As British writer David Badliel recently put it, anti-Semitism is a unique type of racism. Jews are the only people on the planet for which racism has both a high and a low status. Jews are vermin, they are child killers, they lust for blood, they deliberately kill the innocent, but they are also the purveyors of all evil, and they are wealthy and secretly in control. This summer, I had the opportunity to hear Irwin Cotler speak on the resolution against anti-Semitism adopted by Canada's Parliament, known as the Ottawa Protocol. Cotler is a Canadian Liberal MP, also former Justice Minister, and an international human rights advocate. For Cotler, the new anti-Semitism is an assault on the right of the Jewish people to exist as an equal member of the family of nations. In other words, Israel emerges as the collective Jew among the nations. Next slide. I think Cotler's words are so important that we should have a look at them. He says, the demonization of Israel, the portrayal of Israel as the embodiment of all evil in the world, including colonialism, imperialism, apartheid, allows for Israel to emerge in the same way as the classic stereotype of the Jew as the devil. Now you've got Israel as the embodiment of all evil, and this is used as a prologue or a justification for violence against this devil state. Next slide. Today, one of the most ubiquitous anti-Semitic canards is the modern version of the blood libel, the claim that the Israeli government, aided and abetted by Israeli Jewish citizens and their citizen army, purposefully and willfully execute innocent men, women, and perpetrate infanticide. We've seen this anti-Semitic propaganda proliferate in social media in recent months, but it's nothing new. Years ago, there was the lie that Israel was killing Palestinians to harvest their internal organs. That ugliness, too, has ricocheted the globe on social media outlets in recent weeks, including by so-called Palestinian human rights activists, as seen in this Facebook page, which actually is not a Palestinian, it's a guy from Africa. Recently at the UN, a Palestinian Authority official accused Israel of harvesting the organs of terrorists who had been killed by Israeli police. Last night, a new report was published by Palestine Media Watch, suggesting that the PA and Fatah are still doing this, still saying that Israelis are harvesting the organs of the terrorists that are killed. If you look closely at the Facebook page here, and you probably can't see it on the screen from where you're sitting, but this Facebook page was posted by a notorious anti-Israel activist, Bassam Tamimi, and you can read the text. In the text, he gives the citations, the sources for his knowledge that Israelis are killing Palestinians to harvest their organs. And he gets one of his sources and he provides the link to If Americans Knew. You can, next slide, please. If Americans Knew is a vehemently anti-Israel organization run by a woman named Allison Weir. Along with the blood libel, Weir also views Jews as deliberate child murderers. She's written that Judaism is a supremacist, racist religion. In her talks and her blogging and her books, she argues that Jewish Americans are conspiratorial traitors to their country who control the media, the banks, and Congress, and who have, over the years, hoodwinked the US government into supporting Zionism against America's best interests. This, by the way, is the lady that the so-called Jewish organization Jewish Voice for Peace promotes. Jewish Voice for Peace chapters often co-sponsor events with Alison Weir and host her presentations. And yes, Alison Weir came to our community in Syracuse, in Cazenovia, in Ithaca, in Rochester, in Albany. Here's a Facebook snapshot of Jewish Voice for Peace hosting Weir in November in Cleveland. Next slide. Basically, with Jewish Voice for Peace, Jewishness becomes a shield for Israel bashing. The organization ends up giving cover to non-Jewish Israel bashers, helping to protect them against the taint and the charge of anti-Semitism. I'll have a bit more to say on that later. And next slide. But let me go back to one of the most prevalent manifestations of anti-Semitism today in the parallel images of Nazis and Israelis. Such images and hate speech have also circulated on Twitter and the Facebook accounts of key leaders in the anti-Israel boycott movement, including Max Blumenthal, Rania Khalek, and Ali Abunimah. Three themes emerge: the Jews' lust for power and control, so we get caricatures and cartoons of Jewish conspiracies and Zionists controlling the world. Second, Jews' lust for blood, so we get cartoons and caricatures accusing Jews of infanticide. And lastly, we get the low kind of Jew hatred, Jews as inferior, expressed in the blogosphere with images showing Jews as animals, for example. There's an enormous amount of material circulating with these memes. Experts call it Holocaust inversion. Rather than denying the Holocaust, Holocaust rhetoric and imagery is adopted to speak of other traumas. Next slide. As one scholar suggests, writing after the 2008 Israel-Hamas war, the discourse of equation between the Holocaust and Gaza imports a dangerous model of victimization into Palestinian politics. We know that as a genocidal way station, the Warsaw Ghetto ultimately offered no exit except the suicidal struggle that the resistance fighters ultimately waged in 1943. The situation in Gaza is dire, says this academic, who is no fan of Israeli policies. He says the situation in Gaza is dire, but it still allows forms of politics beyond suicide. In recent years, we're seeing some of this infiltrate the American campus. We're seeing events like A World Without Israel, Anti-Zionist Week, Israel Apartheid Week, organized by the student arm of the BDS movement, Students for Justice for Palestine, and often encouraged by faculty and tolerated by administrators. This is nothing short of a direct assault on the identity of Jews on campus. Now, why is that? The reason is that for the vast majority of Jews, Zionism is central to what it means to be Jewish. Next slide. So I wanted to give you a quote from Judea Pearl, who's a professor of computer science at UCLA and president of the Daniel Pearl Foundation, named after his son. And he remarked in a very moving recent op-ed, "As a Jew, I am one with my people through the bonds of common history. Israel, the culmination of that history, is the central symbol of our identity as a people. You will not be curtailing anyone's right to free speech by recognizing that the denial of a Jewish homeland is an unacceptable topic for public discourse on campus, no less acceptable than the denial of human rights to blacks, to women, or to Arabs. Rather, you will be merely affirming the right of the Jewish people to a homeland, which is what Zionism is. That's all Zionism is about, no more, no less." Next slide. Now, Pearl's phrasing of it, in my mind, is really not that much different than the Pope's or President Obama's, both of whom have recently said that denying Israel's right to exist as a Jewish homeland is anti-Semitic. And next slide. This is from a Stanford University graduate student. I like to promote students when I can in my talks. I thought this was a good way of phrasing it. Another way to think about the new anti-Semitism is that it targets Jews not because of their religion, but because of their religion's association with the Israeli nation. So on that point, I want to move to the pushback, okay, to the critique of these positions and to the positions that supporters of BDS make. And the best person for that pushback is Judith Butler. Judith Butler is the doyenne of the BDS anti-Israel movement. She's written extensively in its support, and her key argument is that the Jewish population of the world does not conceive of itself as one with the Israeli state. Now, if she means its practices and its policies, that's fine. A lot of Israelis don't agree with the policies and practices of their government. But she doesn't mean that. Next slide. Because she goes on to write that there is no full and seamless identification of the Jewish people with the state of Israel. Israel is not what keeps the Jewish people alive, and not all Jewish people have their sense of perpetuity invested in the state of Israel. The argument that all Jews have a heartfelt investment in the state of Israel is simply untrue. It will not do to equate the Jews with Zionists, or indeed Jewishness with Zionism. Now, you hear those arguments a lot from supporters of the boycott movement. You hear them voiced in the writings and the speeches of Jewish Voice for Peace, and yes, even J Street. I once asked someone at a conference that I went to, I won't name names, but Judith Butler was there, and I asked somebody, for Judith Butler, is Judaism just a cultural thing? Does being Jewish mean just eating lox and bagels on a Sunday or gefilte fish on Friday night and so on? And the answer was, yep, that pretty much sums it up for her. And I think that's the rub, because BDS and the proponents can be Jewish, like Judith Butler, or they can be non-Jewish, but BDS wants to tell us what our Judaism is all about. Now, nobody would dream of telling Christians that the religion has nothing to do with Jesus. Yet a growing number of people think it's perfectly okay and fine to tell Jews that their religion really has nothing to do with being part of a nation. Next slide. Last May, it's what BDS supporter Janine Salman of Columbia University, my alma mater, so I kind of cover what goes on there. And Janine Salman, a student at Columbia University, was involved in Students for Justice for Palestine, told a New York Times reporter, and it was covered in the New York Times, quote, Zionism is a political identity, and Judaism is a religious identity, and it does a disservice to both to blur the line. Never mind that neither the Bible nor 4,000 years of Jewish tradition recognizes any such divide. Put simply, Zion and the love of Zion cannot be excised from Judaism, at least not without diluting Judaism so much so that you've invented a new religion. Now, rereading Butler for this talk, I was reminded of the PLO Charter, which you may think is odd. Now, the PLO Charter is interesting, 1964 Charter, and I recommend you go look at it, because it's not like the Hamas Charter. The Hamas Charter is an anti-Semitic screed that applauds the protocols for the elders of Zion. The PLO Charter does not cite the protocols for the elders of Zion, and Butler doesn't either. But like Butler, the PLO Charter takes an inherently anti-Semitic stance. Next slide. Because it says that Judaism is merely a set of religious practices. Jews can stay in Palestine, according to the PLO Charter, where they should be content to live as a protected minority, just as they do in all the other countries around the world. Now, maybe Butler and Janine Salman and the PLO never picked up the Hebrew Bible, because if they did, they would know something about Am Yisrael. They would know something about the nation of Israel, and that the Jewish life cycle revolves around it. And it's really worth reading this Article 18 of the Palestinian National Charter, which again tries to define what Judaism means for Jews. Next slide. So when is criticism of Israel not anti-Semitism? It is not anti-Semitic to challenge the occupation of the West Bank. But if you do challenge it, be prepared for the pushback that it's not an occupation, okay? You will get pushback. Criticizing specific Israeli policies does not make you an anti-Semite. Not happy with the Israeli government's policy of demolishing the family homes of convicted terrorists? Many Israelis think it's the right thing to do, but a minority disagree, and they're not self-hating Jews. There's plenty of room in the pro-Israel discourse for anti-occupation progressives. But to be pro-Israel, you need to actually do stuff that is pro-Israel. So take J Street, formed in 2008. It claims to be pro-Israel, but what does it actually do on behalf of Israel? Because all of J Street's work seems to be in the opposite direction. So J Street lobbied against the Obama administration's veto of a UN Security Council resolution that was decidedly one-sided and critical of Israel. J Street urged a retraction of Obama's threat to use military force as a last resort to stop Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. And J Street has denounced Israel's security barrier. Some of J Street's leaders, and next slide, some of J Street's leaders take a decidedly anti-Israel position. Daniel Levy, the organization's co-founder, has said that the Holocaust excused the creation of Israel, which was otherwise, quote, an act that was wrong. Last month, a J Street chapter at Vassar wrote a very disturbing letter to the Vassar Student Association. The chapter had wanted to attend the Haaretz conference in New York City that took place a few weeks ago, and so they asked the Student Association for funding so that they could go to the conference. And they were told by some members of the Finance Committee that you're not getting the funding, we disapprove of it, because, quote, the Vassar Student Association is explicitly an anti-racist organization, and Zionism is an inherently racist ideology. So therefore, because there will be speakers at the Haaretz conference, and you know, Haaretz is left of center, okay? You can't quibble with that, right? But there'll be speakers at this Haaretz conference who are Zionists. They're leftists, but they're Zionists. No way are we funding something where you're going to get to go and hear from Zionists. Now, what was the response of J Street U, this Vassar chapter? Instead of vehemently disagreeing with the notion that Zionism is racism, J Street ignored it. Zionism is racism? Just one of many valid opinions that must be respected, according to J Street. Here's another example. At last year's J Street conference in March, panelists and audience members entertained the idea that Jews should be content to live as a protected minority in an Arab-majority Palestine. So, do we have to wonder why BDS proponents are so thrilled with a group like J Street? J Street appears to have an open tent policy. For who? For people who basically want Israel to disappear. Despite its avowed purpose, the organization does not defend Israel's existence against its critics. Instead, it gives its critics a platform where they can spout their hatred of a Jewish state unopposed. There needs to be some bottom line on what it means to be pro-Israel. Being pro-Israel means you don't debate Israel's right to exist. You don't reject Jewish peoplehood. You don't say that Zionism is racism. And you don't co-sponsor events with Israel haters and with anti-Semites. But J Street is saying and doing many of those things today. I don't think it started that way. I even spoke on its behalf a few years ago. I saw it as a left-of-center, pro-Zionist, pro-peace organization. I wanted to support that voice in the discourse on Israel and the Middle East, even though sometimes I'm personally skeptical of it. I don't know what's going on in J Street. Maybe it's been hijacked. I'm not sure. I haven't done the research on it. I have done the research on Jewish Voice for Peace. I know there are supporters in this room, in this hall, who are J Street supporters. I would suggest read up on it, raise your concerns, make the organization do better, make it go back to its roots. So far, I've suggested that the leaders of the anti-Israel boycott movement trade in anti-Semitic canards and blood libels. BDS representatives often describe themselves as peace activists, but they spurn cooperation with the Israeli peace movement, and they condone and even applaud violence against Jews. Suicide bombings, knifing attacks, these are seen as legitimate forms of national resistance. Judith Butler, again, the University of California professor who I just mentioned, her books, her articles are among the most popular and widely assigned in the humanities in American universities and college campuses. She's written, quote, Hamas and Hezbollah are social movements that are progressive, that are on the left, that are part of the global left. Never mind that these groups have a murderous contempt for women and have a nasty tendency to throw gay men off rooftops. Most people don't know it, but do you know where the call for the boycotting of Israel originated? Anybody know? Where? In Israel. Anybody have another idea? Actually, the evidence suggests that it originated at the notorious anti-Semitic United Nations Conference in Durban in 2001, just days before 9/11, a meeting that was so full of Jew hatred that the US delegation walked out of it. The BDS mission statement hasn't wavered since then, and it still calls for the dismantlement of the Jewish state. Basically, BDS wants to sanction Israeli companies, Israeli universities, until Israel agrees to implode. Next slide. BDS leaders like Omar Barghouti have stated many times that the goal is to end Israel, that the achievement of Palestinian rights is not compatible with the existence of Israel. He has publicly said, quote, that if the occupation of the West Bank ends, it will not end the support for BDS. Now, this guy should probably boycott himself because he's a Tel Aviv University MA student. In fact, all of these BDS supporters should boycott themselves because they all use Israeli technology in their smartphones and in their web platforms and in their medicines. Assad Abu Khalil, another BDS leader, says, the real aim of BDS is to bring down the state of Israel. Now, how can this stance not inspire resentment and retrenchment, the exact opposite of the constructive dialogue for coexistence that is so sorely needed? And why should only Israel be targeted? It is troubling, I think, that BDS only targets Israel, because this singular focus perpetuates the myth of Jewish centrality. It plays into and it reinforces the scapegoating of Israel as among the Middle East's and even the world's most pressing problems. It labels Israelis as inhumane and unfeeling. They deliberately kill children. And it offers only one solution: boycott, marginalization, which of course has been the tactic and the goal of anti-Semites over the ages. Targeting only Israel for censure also infantilizes the Palestinians by wrongly assuming that they have no agency, that they carry no responsibility, that they are merely acted upon. It's an astonishingly condescending stance to the Arab, in my view, in which Palestinians are credited as having no choice to approve or disapprove of compromise solutions which have been offered since at least the 1930s, or to perform or not perform acts of violence. To my mind, it's exactly the kind of patronizing Orientalist approach of the Arab that my alma mater, Columbia University's Edward Said, once warned against. Launched 10 years ago, the BDS movement has not had a lot of success. Governments, Fortune 500 companies are not buying into it. Every week there seems to be another BDS fail. Important criticisms keep getting raised. Does boycotting Israeli products, or even products produced in the West Bank, help or hurt Palestinian workers? Is this in fact what they're asking for? What impact will closing university exchange programs between Israel and the US and Europe have on Palestinian Israelis who work and study in these programs? These are data-driven questions. They are evidentiary-based. They require evidence-based analysis, and that's what academics should care about. Academia should be the very last place that BDS should be successful, but it's here where it's made the greatest inroads. Next slide. Now, another arena, in addition to academia, where BDS has made inroads is in America's progressive churches, especially the United Church of Christ, the Presbyterian Church, the Quakers, the Mennonite Church. That's a topic for another talk. Maybe you'll invite me to return and I can speak on it. But for now, I'll just say that vehemently anti-Israel positions, including ones that cross the line into anti-Semitism in the ways that I've described here, have become deeply, deeply entrenched in America's mainline churches. Sabeel is a good example. You have Sabeel here. You have it operating here in Rochester under a moniker, Christians Witnessing Palestine. Check it out. Read my articles on it. Don't say you're not informed, right? Now, whenever I see the various resolutions of professional academic organizations like the American Studies Association, the Women's Studies Association, or now circulating for a vote, a petition for anthropologists to boycott all of Israel's universities and colleges, I'm always struck by the lack of data in these documents. Whatever data there is, it's unsourced, or the citations are to highly dubious sources. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. In the report that accompanies the resolution currently up for a vote at the American Anthropological Association, there's a fact noted. Israel blocks books coming into Palestine, creating a situation where books are falling out of Palestinian culture. That's a quote from the report. Israel blocks books coming into Palestine, creating a situation where books are falling out of Palestinian culture. It's a staggering falsehood. No such thing is happening. Then there's the claim that Mizrahi Jews, Jews from Arab lands, are given menial roles in the armed forces, in the IDF, while Ashkenazi Jews serve in prestigious positions. It's an outright lie. Several chiefs of staff, many generals, all positions in the IDF have been held by Mizrahim. I'd like to bring New York examples when I can, because we're New Yorkers, right? We reside here in New York, so here's one. Next slide. There's a weird petition circulating at SUNY, City University of New York. It's for the university system to divest from the prison system. Basically, since 2011, according to the petition, SUNY has been investing about $300,000 in private prisons, which, quote, does immense harm to SUNY by being complicit in mass incarceration, militarization of the university, and overall oppression. It's about a page long. You can read it at change.org. Hundreds of people have signed it, some identifying as faculty and as students. There are 6 clauses to this SUNY petition on the prison system. The first 5 are about SUNY, the New York prison system, and the NYPD. And then there's clause 6 at the end of the petition, almost like an afterthought, hidden all the way at the bottom. You almost can't see it. By the way, quote, we also demand divestment from Israeli companies, as well as divestment from organizations that fund the existence of apartheid Israel. No other country, just Israel. We see that on a lot of campuses these days. It's an attempt to hijack unrelated causes, often worthy causes, by interjecting anti-Israel messaging. We call it intersectionality. So if you're opposed to homophobia, if you're concerned about fossil fuels, if you're upset about Ferguson, if you think Black Lives Matter, then you must also perceive of Israel as an illegitimate colonial settler state. In this global campaign for social justice, Jews are cast as white, colonial Westerners, and the Arabs and Palestinians as people of color. Israel and those who support it become enmeshed in a moral binary. Next slide. This is why Jewish Voice for Peace recently targeted Rabbi Susan Talve of St. Louis. She's a beloved civil rights activist for progressive causes. You may recall she gave the Hanukkah blessing at the White House a few weeks ago. She's one of America's most prominent rabbis. She's huge in the Black Lives Matter movement in St. Louis. But she's a self-identified Zionist, and that just won't do for Israel haters. So JVP joined up with other BDS Israel haters and defamed her as a terrorist. And you can see that in this Facebook and Twitter post. She's a real terrorist, hashtag real terrorist. I wrote about it. You can read my article, it's unbelievable. It got Facebook page 3,500 times in St. Louis, and I heard that it did some good there. The irony is all this really, is that BDS proponents rail against the silencing of their free speech, but in fact, they're the ones who are hostile to debate and dialogue. Next slide. A few weeks ago, Israeli professor Moshe Habertal was heckled during a talk at the University of Minnesota by BDS supporters. And the funny thing is that they would have loved what Habertal had to say, because if they bothered to listen, he's a fierce critic of Israel's counterterror policy. On today's campus, there's a troubling double standard that's emerging. Jewish students, faculty, and staff are being told that free speech requires that they tolerate the hate and the hateful speakers, that they must tolerate, in the name of academic freedom, events and classroom discussions that no other campus group, not the LGBTQ, not African Americans, not Muslim Americans, not women, not Asian Americans, no other group is being asked to tolerate. Our university campuses should be welcoming learning environments. All forms of racism should be equally deplored. All identity-forming symbols should be equally respected, but this is not happening. On campuses today, where any microaggression that offends any minority group is immediately deplored, the toleration of micro and macro aggressions against Jews goes unnoticed. And so we have debates over BDS resolutions where Israeli soldiers are accused of deliberately killing women and poisoning wells. Today, professors can tweet that anti-Semitism is justified because of Zionism. They can call on the murder and kidnapping of innocent Israeli civilians. They can write of Israelis being akin to bloodthirsty cannibals. They can post about Israel deliberately targeting Palestinian children for death. Next slide. Here you have some tweets, the many hundreds and hundreds of tweets of scholar and academic Steven Salaita. Salaita was feted, given awards at professional conferences. He would go around the country getting standing ovations from thousands of professors. But if a pro-Israel faculty member writes one intemperate, I would argue juvenile comment, on Facebook about Hamas, as a Connecticut College professor did last year, and then apologizes for causing any unintended offense, he is raked over the coals. He is vilified as a racist hate-mongerer, all with the support of faculty and administrators. And then the administrators offer the aggrieved students counseling sessions. I kid you not. Next slide. Google Andrew Pessin, find out all about a modern-day witch hunt of an American Jewish professor. In our country, hate speech is free speech. Right? The obligation of government and university faculty, administrators too, is not to censure even the most controversial speech, but no one is morally obligated to sit silently when Jewish identity is disrespected and negatively labeled. There are lots of legitimate criticisms of Israeli policies. There are innumerable legitimate ways to criticize Israeli policies. There are many ways in which those criticisms can be aired, but a boycott of Israel is not one of them. Simply put, a university cannot accept any moral legitimacy of a boycott of Israel or equivocate in denouncing it. These resolutions stifle the voices of those genuinely interested in resolving the Middle East conflict and inhibit its unbiased examination. Academic boycotts are an instrument for silencing and intimidation, plain and simple. Now, to conclude my remarks, I want to say that we need to care about this issue. BDS is a movement dedicated to the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state. It views Israel as fundamentally illegitimate, oppressive, and immoral. It masquerades as a human rights movement and has convinced many, many people who dislike Netanyahu, who dislike Israeli policies, who don't like Israeli occupation. It's convinced a lot of those people. Now, there are many supporters of BDS, maybe some of you are here tonight, who are motivated, I believe, by a genuine humanitarian concern, right? From the goodness of their heart. And they see it as their duty to advance peace between Israel and Palestinians. But you are blind. You are blind to the BDS movement's true goals. Ladies and gentlemen, as my colleague Joshua Muravchik has recently stated, with or without anti-Semitism, hatred of Israel is in itself the most deadly thing facing the Jewish people since Hitler. At the end of the day, BDS is not about Israel. It's actually about us. Israel is the target of the BDS movement, but first in the firing line are diaspora Jews. Next slide. BDS has virtually no impact on Israel's economy, which continues to flourish. Even in the academic sector in Israel, while there's some impact that we're beginning to see in the soft sciences and in the humanities, the university system as a whole continues to benefit from partnerships with the best universities in the world. BDS has not delivered a single tangible benefit to the Palestinians. As Ben Cohen recently wrote, BDS is essentially a domestic form of anti-Semitism that attacks local Jews through the demonizing of the Jewish state. Quarantining Israel in order to eliminate it may be the stated goal of BDS, but its immediate and often its only impact is on Jews in the vicinity of the movement's propaganda activities. Next slide. So, Jewish supermarket goers, right, who just want to buy an Israeli avocado, are accosted by people who are chanting that they're legitimizing crimes against humanity. And in Europe, in Australia, in South Africa, we've seen what I call supermarket invasions. But one too happened here, went on for years, a few miles south of here in Ithaca, at an Ithaca co-op, now defunct because they were forced finally by the courts. They had to bring a lawsuit against this group to shut down the operation. But it had an effect in Ithaca because most of us aren't activists. We want a quiet life. We know BDS is discrimination based on national origins, but who really wants to cross an angry picket line? Now, for the non-Jew, right, the vast majority of the American electorate, the danger is that BDS will instill a lifelong animosity towards Israel, but more importantly, I think, a lifelong animosity against Jewish Americans who are its supporters. These kids will be our next generation of voters, our upcoming teachers, our lawyers, our lawmakers, and of course, our neighbors. So I don't think this can go unchallenged. It's something we all need to care about. Thank you.